Ladies and gentlemen, Sridhar, thank you. Well, it's always hard to get on the stage after the big guns from Amazon in a very good and very successful Linux Foundation project. But we are here where we are, and maybe you will get the better idea why generally the upstream endeavors that are done in multiple projects are quite important. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bruno Banelli. I come from a company called Sartura. We are a Croatian, European-based company, and we are in numbers approximately about the size of this room populated with you people here. Of course, comparing that to all the large companies that are here. Oh, by the way, Sridhar, can I? Oh, I can do it myself. Marvelous. Then I'll take it over. So comparing to Amazon, comparing to literally most of the companies that are present here, we do not count numbers. However, what we do, and what we do relatively successful, is doing Linux upstreaming. And before we get into the particularities of the upstreams to the DENT project, or related to the DENT project, I would like to spare some time to actually try to give a better idea and maybe even potentially demystify what does this very dogmatic and mystique upstreaming means, especially in the sense of the Linux kernel. So generally what I will be aiming today is primarily focused to the low-level embedded parts of the Linux community. Of course, as you know, many things happen in the Linux community, and this is only a small fraction. And taken into consideration that I would presume that all of us were at the keynotes yesterday, and we had spoken about hundreds of CPU cores, about kilowatts of thermal design power, and large language models that count multiple billions of parameters. Let me tell you, the upstreaming, especially in the low-level embedded part of Linux kernel, is still done via plain regular email. So for all of your very successful projects that run on very large hardware, some of the things done there are still done in a very old-fashioned and plain way. But generally, what are the motivations, what are the reasons, and what are the requirements for upstreaming to the Linux kernel is something that I'd like to spare some words in the following minutes. I apologize. It would seem that in the United States I caught some very unfriendly virus, so my voice is not what it used to be. Anyway, the process of upstreaming, and this is generally applicable, but for the sake of this argument we will be talking about Linux kernel, is actually taking your downstream private changes to a vanilla mainline path in hope they will be propagated and pushed to further versions. Why is that possible? Well, that is possible because what Linux gave us and what the whole open source format gave us is a freedom to be able to do that without generally any legal obligation to actually do that. So this is the reason why these communities are so powerful, and the reason why these communities made it to Mars, but unfortunately still didn't make it to desktop. Anyway, the process of upstreaming something to Linux kernel, as we said, is pushing your private downstreams, your private forks, to the mainline version. Now, what would be one's motivation to do it? Well, I think I've skipped myself ahead a bit. Well, the fact is, as I've said, You have witnessed large companies here, tech giants, people that changed the world radically in the sense and aspect of some sort of products. But what we actually do is help those products be maintained and help keeping the low-level parts of these products in the mainline version of Linux kernel. Of course, these changes and these modifications and these things that are added are being heavily and thoroughly reviewed, steered in the right direction, and done in every possible way in order to be stable and long-term. Now, we live in a world where a monetary debt is something that most of us either have or had encountered in their lives. Arguably, we can discuss that monetary debt is more or less virtual and that it can be written off, but we are now facing the situation where we have inflation and some of these debts are being washed away. Unfortunately, there is a type of debt that not even inflation can kill, and that's a technological debt. So by each and every private change that you do to the Linux kernel and keep it for yourself and not try pushing it to the upstream, you are creating a technological debt that is very, very hard to mitigate in the end. So if you do not upstream, you either have the possibility to backport or forward port, and both of these terms are approximately something based upon lines: would you rather have your leg or your arm chopped off? So neither of these options are kind of what you would like to experience. That being said, and I will once again return to the numbers, by us doing the upstream work, this is a way that we made a partial influence in this community. This is the reason why our friends from Amazon tolerate us with all our technical quirks and problems that we have. And this is the reason why we stand proudly on OCP, on Linux Foundation, next to Amazon, next to Keysight, next to all the other members of the DENT project, even though we are considerably smaller in each and every aspect, except possibly in pride, and contribute to the project as best as we can. Once again, this was possible owing to the fact that we are working in the open source community and that we have that freedom which is indispensable and cannot be done with. Now, to give some more details, sorry, what we've actually done for the DENT project. So ONI is part of the project and some contributions were done related to it. These particular TLV info tables are some EEPROM-based mumbo-jumbo type length value combinations of the EEPROM, and they were the ones that were implemented through the NVMem framework project, which actually allowed for access of various non-volatile memories, so EEPROMs or any other devices that possess such capabilities, to be obtained through the kernel. So traditional design had limitations for the flexibility of TLV info, and these collaborative efforts within the Linux kernel community led to that layout parser, and drivers and similar solutions dynamically extract data. And finally, after a lot of hard work, these TLV info tables are now supported in the Linux kernel, benefiting users across the board. So our small Linux Foundation-based community of DENT Network Operating System made it possible for each and every individual business or anyone to utilize and leverage the success of that kind of code being upstreamed to the Linux kernel. And of course, we are very proud of it because this is a collaborative effort. This is effort that is not only technical, but was given much other thoughts before it was implemented. And of course, you can read some additional information on the official blog of our webpage. The next thing is our famously infamous power over Ethernet that everyone needs and everyone likes, but often it's troublesome for different reasons. So, as you all probably are aware, we simply transmit data and power through Ethernet cables. There are various standards, so I won't be naming them in particular. However, what the problem is, or actually was, is that the official Linux kernel lacks PoE support. I will get back to Tashkin's presentation just a bit. You remember when Tashkin was talking about switchdev, and he was absolutely correct. So, switchdev is de facto a standard, and this is absolutely marvelous and fantastic. However, what Tashkin said afterwards also made very much sense, and this is the reason why roadmaps are going in some other directions than switchdev at this moment. However, once again, do not forget that the upstreaming efforts are invaluable and absolutely necessary, so we wouldn't create too much of that technical debt we had spoken before. However, there was no kernel subspace or user space API for PoE, and this is resulting in costly fragmented vendor-specific PoE implementations. DENT project, luckily, is funding the PoE implementation in Linux, and it addresses the industry challenge and tracks progress towards standardization of PoE support in Linux, and this is something that can be accessed through our official GitHub repo. That would be all concerning the upstreaming efforts. If I'm not mistaken, we have a very good workshop afterwards. I hope all of you will stay. And of course, I would be more than happy to try to answer some of your questions if you have any. Taras, we're good? Okay. Thank you all once again and enjoy the workshop. I'm sure I will.